Hey, Seppi, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for asking. Absolutely. So, name's Drew Seyfried. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Father's in healthcare. He's a primary care physician who owned and operated his own practice for a long time. So, I've been very close to healthcare my entire life. For work, I work for HC Tech. My work centered around talent acquisition, healthcare managed services, and professional services, career development, and helping people connect to meaningful opportunities in healthcare. I've had the opportunity to work with candidates at different stages of their careers, from people trying to break into the new field to experienced professionals looking for their next leadership opportunities. I've also worked closely with organizations that are trying to solve real workforce challenges, especially as healthcare becomes more digital and data driven. So, in my current work, I'm very close to the needs of healthcare organizations. I see firsthand how important it is to have the right technology, talent in place, whether it's supporting applications, infrastructure, cybersecurity, service desk, project work, or broader digital transformation. That gives me a front row view of how talent strategy impacts healthcare operations. That's ultimately what we're all here for. All for that. Well, that's a great question. From my perspective, the biggest challenges is that organizations are still trying to solve modern workforce problems with an old playbook. So for many years, talent acquisition has been treated more as a transaction. A role opens, recruiter finds the candidate, a manager makes a hire, and everyone moves on. That approach isn't really working anymore, especially in healthcare and technology where change is constant. The systems are super complex. The cost of a talent gap can affect organizations, clinicians, and ultimately, like we talked about earlier, the patient experience. So, the organizations that are struggling the most are not necessarily the ones with the weakest employer brand or the lowest compensation. They're often the ones that are not connected to workforce strategy, to business strategy. So, they're asking, how do we fill this role? When really the better question is, what capability do we need to build, protect, or scale? So, that shift matters. In healthcare IT, for example, you may have a need for specialized EHR support, application expertise, service desk coverage, project leadership, cybersecurity awareness, operational discipline, and people who understand the clinical environment. But you might not need all of those capabilities at the same time and in the same way or permanently inside your walls. There's a lot of different things you can look at there. So I think the future belongs to the organizations that can blend the internal talent and external expertise with flexible staffing, managed services, and career development into one workforce ecosystem. The second challenge is developing and attracting, or is the development. Attracting talent gets the headline, but developing the talent is where the competitive advantages is created. People want more than just a job description. Like you and me, they want the path. They want to know, can I grow here? Will someone invest in me? Will I be exposed to meaningful work? Organizations that answer those questions clearly, they're going to be the ones that come out on top. You know, the, they, the organizations that do not, they'll continue to lose good people. And even after they successfully recruit them, they won't be able to retain them. So the real challenge isn't just finding talent. It's really designing the environment where talent can perform and they can grow and they can stay, most importantly. Yeah, another great question. So, the leaders employers are seeking today aren't just technical experts. They're translators. And I think that's absolutely critical. And by that, I mean that they can translate between technology and operations, between IT and clinicians, between strategy and execution, and between the way systems can do and what the business actually needs. So, in healthcare specifically, the most valuable leaders understand that technology is not the destination. Better access, better workflows, better data, better clinician experience, and better patient care are the destination. As you mentioned earlier, that's our North Star. So, of course, technical competency matters, but the employers need people who understand, the EHRs, the data, applications, infrastructure, delivery, the AI tools, which has been a hot button issue, as well as digital transformation. But the differentiator is judgment. As you mentioned earlier, can you prioritize? Can you communicate under pressure? Can you lead through ambiguity? And can you make complex issues understandable to non-technical stakeholders? The emerging leaders who stand out usually have five attributes from what I've seen. First, they're curious. They don't want to just learn a system, they want to learn the business around the system. Next, they're resilient because healthcare and technology both move fast and the work can be very pressure or under a lot of pressure. So leaders have to stay steady when the environment is not. Third, they're collaborative. The days of siloed leadership, they're over. Everyone is working together hand in hand. So the best leaders build bridges across the teams. The fourth thing is they're outcome focused. It's very critical here. Everyone's interested in outcomes. So they don't measure success by activity, they really measure it by the impact that it's having on the organization. And finally, they have a service mindset. In healthcare, every ticket, every project, every implementation, every optimization effort eventually connects back to a patient, a clinician, or a care team. So the leaders who understand that bringing a different level of accountability to the work are going to excel. So, that's where employers are really looking for. They're looking for people who combine the technical fluency with the human centered leadership. Yeah. Um, well, you know, the people who successfully transition into new careers usually understand that reinvention is not just about gaining a new skill, it's about building a new identity. So, you know, that's a big distinction here. Many people enter a career development program thinking, I need to complete this course, I need to get my resume updated and apply for the jobs. I mean, those things matter, but they're only part of it. You know, the candidates who success or who succeeds start thinking differently. They begin to see themselves as problem solvers in a new field. They learn the language of the industry, they build confidence through practice, and they seek feedback. And they get comfortable, most importantly, being uncomfortable. Because when you're transitioning, that's going to be something that you're going to live in for quite some time. So, you know, career transition requires humility and discipline at the same time. You know, the humility to say, I have more to learn, and the discipline to keep showing up even when it feels uncertain. Because there's going to be plenty of uncertainty as you're transitioning. The candidates who struggle often underestimate the behavioral side of the transition. You know, they may focus heavily on the technical training, but avoid the networking, the mock interviews, um, or real world applications, or just the personal branding aspect as well, which is huge in this market. You know, they may have to wait until they feel completely ready, but the readiness is rarely a single moment. It's really built through repetition. So the candidates who succeed also know how to connect their past experiences with their future direction. So someone coming from, say, customer service, operations, education, healthcare administration, or any other field, they might think they're starting from zero, but that's really not the case. They may already have the communication skills, the empathy, the process discipline, the problem solving ability, stakeholder management, or the resilience that's needed. You know, the key is really learning how to translate those strengths into the language of the new career. So learning that language is definitely critical. So that is why I think career development programs are so powerful when they combine training, coaching, mentorship, interview prep, and practical experience. So, for example, you know, the careerist actually describes a model of helping people without traditional tech or coding backgrounds entering technology through structured training and career support. So, another thing that I love about what we do at Brighthour is we offer a lot of those tracks. But I think the biggest separator is the mindset. Successful career changers don't ask who's going to give me a chance. They ask, how do I demonstrate that I'm ready to become the person that this opportunity requires? Good one. I believe workforce development has to become a shared responsibility. It's no longer a single organization, a school, an employer, or an industry leader that can solve the pipeline challenges alone. So organizations need to be more intentional about defining the capabilities they need, not just the roles they need to fill. They also need to create more entry points. Not every future leader is going to arrive through a traditional path. Some will come from boot camps, career transition programs, community colleges, military backgrounds, clinical operations, customer support, or any adjacent industries. We have to keep looking for talent, or I'm sorry, if we keep looking for talent in only the places that we've always looked, we'll keep getting the same workforce gaps. I see this time and time again with many of the clients I work for. They come very set in their ways about, I need this one specific person, and they're not willing to break that mold. So, educational institutions need to stay closer to the market as well. Curriculum can't be built in isolation from what employers actually need. Students need practical experience. They need exposure to real world work or real workflows. They need mentorship opportunities and understanding how work gets done inside of a modern healthcare and technology environments. Because I think there's a gap there between the education and the real world application. As far as industry leaders go, I think they have a responsibility to connect the two. We need help to define what job ready really means. We need to create apprenticeships, mentorships, pathways, internships, or even returnships, new buzzword, but project-based learning opportunities and partnerships that give the talent a bridge from learning to contributing. I also think that we need to rethink leadership development. Too often we wait until someone has a title before we teach them how to lead. And I think that is backwards. Leadership behaviors should be developed earlier. As you mentioned, communication, accountability, influence, adaptability, the decision making, really the emotional intelligence from a leadership perspective, and the ability to lead across complexity. So, in healthcare IT, the need is especially urgent because health systems are balancing digital transformation, cost pressures, clinician burnout, patient expectations, cybersecurity risk, and operational complexity. Mhm. So that requires a stronger bench of leaders who understand both the technology and the mission of healthcare. So I think the future of workforce pipeline will not be built by hiring alone, but it will be built through the ecosystem of employers, educators, service partners, staffing partners, mentors, and industry leaders. They're all working together to create that access, the readiness, and the mobility within inside the organizations. That's a great one. Love this question. So my advice is simple: become known for solving problems bigger than your job description. That is really the difference between someone who's good in a role and someone who's ready for leadership. You know, Early in your career, you're often evaluated on how well you complete an assigned task. But as you grow, people start evaluating something different. They want to know, do you see around the corners? Do you make the team better? Do you communicate clearly? Do you bring solutions, not just issues? And do people trust you when things get difficult? Leadership is not just something that suddenly begins when you get promoted. Leadership begins the moment you take ownership. So that does not mean that pretending to have all the answers. In fact, the best leaders are often the ones that are the best learners. They ask better questions, they listen carefully, they understand the context, and they know when to speak, when to support, and when to challenge the room. For everyone trying to advance, I would say this: don't just build a resume, build a reputation. Be the person who follows through, be the person who can simplify the complexity or the complex issues, and be the person who helps others succeed. And something that I love, be the person who connects the work to a larger purpose. I think that's something that we all would really need, is something that brings value into our work. So titles can be given, credibility has to be earned, though. And credibility is built every single day in the way that you show up, the way you solve problems, and the way people feel after working with you. It's been a pleasure, Seppi. Thank you for having me on.